Kevin, which we all saw the award ceremony, I think last time we were on Thursday as a group. Lamar Jackson won the MVP. We all know that. Had the great moment with Joe Flacco and Lamar behind stage. Joe wins Comeback Player of the Year. But the big talk actually is that Lamar Jackson was one vote away from being a two-time unanimous MVP. But one person voted against it and had Lamar finish third, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin. But you had him on. You had Aaron on to Locked On Ravens to talk about it.
Yeah, so Aaron and I talked the day after, or I guess 2 days after. We came out on Saturday here with the show, and he was the guy, would have been the first two-time unanimous MVP. And I mean, there are only two of them total now. It's Tom Brady and Lamar. But his bracket was Josh Allen 1, Dak Prescott 2, and Lamar Jackson 3. And so he's the creator. Advanced stats are everywhere in sports now. So he's the creator of the stat DVOA, which is like it's on a per play basis. You weigh certain things with, whether he weighs rushing and passing the same. So he looked at his stats. And so I had him on Locked On Ravens, which is my government name. It's also the show I host. But we talked about, he spent about 40 minutes with me. And the clip that I put out got a lot of attention. And he pretty much said, look, he looked at these stats and he went back and looked at things like PFF grades and SIS scores. And to Aaron's credit, later in the interview, he did say, he kept saying that, I watched the Miami game. The Miami game was incredible. And so it wasn't all that. Game. Yes, all that. But so I think we have the clip where we're going to play it. But Aaron talked about, I just asked him straight up, why wasn't Lamar from a general sense your MVP? And, he had some interesting things to say about it.
Let's roll the clip.
Was Lamar Jackson not your pick for MVP this season?
The irony here, of course, is that I've been driving the Baltimore bandwagon for the entire season as far as Baltimore as a team, and we'll get to that, I think, in a little bit. But when it came to individual stats, starting with DVOA, Lamar Jackson did not perform as well as some other quarterbacks this year, and it's not that it was close, It wasn't like it was Brock Purdy and Josh Allen and Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson were all in a tight little bind, and they were all close to each other, and it just so happened Jackson was fourth. He was fairly behind. And then I said, well, I'm not perfect. Not everything I do is perfect. Let's go look at some competing advanced stats. So I looked at PFF grades, and I looked at SIS total points, and I looked at EPA, and I looked at win probability, and I looked at ESPN QBR, and every single one of these metrics had Josh Allen and Dak Prescott ahead of Lamar Jackson, And sometimes other players, sometimes Brock Purdy, for example. But each of these metrics includes rushing, So we are looking at rushing and includes interceptions. So they are accounting for the 18 interceptions by Josh Allen, which are bad, right? Duh. But it accounts for all the good from all these players and the bad from these players. And every single one of these metrics put Lamar Jackson behind Josh Allen and Dak Prescott.
So what you're telling me is Aaron is the Brandon Staley of the media world. Because that's essentially all. He didn't put any personal opinion on it. He didn't watch the games. At least it didn't look like he watched the games. And we've talked about it on this channel at length that Dak Prescott didn't deserve an MVP necessarily because when it came time for him to show up in the games that mattered, the games that actually had good teams he was going up against, he didn't show up. He beat up on the good teams, no problem. But the bad teams, he would beat on the bad teams, no problem. But the good teams, and then when it came time to the playoffs to actually show up, he didn't. So it's like, I know the playoffs aren't taken into account, but when it comes to strength of schedule and the amount of teams that Lamar Jackson beat this season that were over 500 and the playoff teams that he had beat during the regular season, it was a no-brainer. And to 49 other people, it was at least.
Yeah, it really just it felt like, even I don't want to say it was something where they didn't want Lamar Jackson to have 2 unanimous MVPs and they wanted someone else to go. And I've seen that conspiracy. I get what he's saying. Everyone has the right to their opinion. I don't agree with it at all. I think that, when you put all of this, what he was saying was a lot to what's the most statistical player.
But that's why I said he's the Brandon Staley.
Exactly. And it's that's not what the award is. It's the most valuable player. And it's who is the biggest value to their team, where if you really take them off, the team is doing the worst. And that,
Yeah.
if you took Lamar Jackson off that Ravens team, they are nowhere close to where they were.
I actually asked him that question at the very end. I said, well, because we got on a tangent about Justin Tucker and how valuable he is. And I said, well, do you think that that Lamar Jackson, if you talk about like most valuable player, do you think he is? And he said no. He said, I think he said Mahomes. Then I can't remember who he put it to. It was either Lamar or Josh Allen. I can't remember. But the other thing with MVP for me is the sports are what have you done for me now lately? And you look at what Lamar did for the Ravens, again, regular season award, right? So you look at after the bye, look at the Rams, how I think that was the game of the year for the Ravens, in my opinion. A statement win, leads that drive that, should have been a game-winning drive, wasn't because the Rams tied it up. But then you have the Jaguars game. That was essentially not the beginning of the downfall, but it essentially put the Jaguars on a bit of a nosedive.
Yeah.
49ers game, obviously Christmas night statement. Miami game. I don't think people remember because Miami, look at the final product of how injured they were and kind of how vulnerable they looked in the playoffs. But that was a game for the number 1 seed in the AFC at the time. And so I brought that up with Aaron, and he said, well, Josh Allen also, he had that stretch to kind of lead Buffalo back in the playoffs, which is fair. I mean, Josh Allen did that, but I do think that, my vote would have been for Lamar as well. And I think that, and I've stood on it for a while, that he is the most valuable player in the league. But my thing is, you look at that stretch, it's not like he was playing badly before it. He was also playing well. So I think you look at full season. Yeah,
there was no drop off with Lamar.
No. Yeah. So I would put it this way, and
stand on business.
So this is just where I put it. I respect everyone's opinion, whether I agree or not. That's just, I respect it. But for me, this is when I hate when you go, the metrics say.
Yeah.
Throw out the fucking metrics at times. And I mean that sincerely. It's when you have the eye test for players. That is my biggest thing. What do players say and what happens when the moments are against the best teams? The eye test showed me that Lamar Jackson was the best quarterback against the best teams.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, where it looks at. You look down his stretch of the final games. You mentioned, Kevin, if we're going to go stats, if we're going to go by some metrics, Lamar Jackson, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception against the Rams, ran for 70 yards. Jacksonville threw for 171 yards, ran for 97. San Francisco, 2 touchdowns, thrown 252 passing yards, 5 touchdowns against Miami. And by the way, the other team in the NFC Championship game, the Detroit Lions early in the season, Lamar Jackson, 4 total touchdowns, almost a perfect passer rating. So the teams that we're bringing up, and yes, Lamar had some tough games against the Browns, one of the best teams in the league. He also had a very dominant game against the Browns in Cleveland.
Yep.
Lamar Jackson, to me, when you're just looking at the metrics in the eye test, did he pass the test? And that's when you look at it and go, damn, if you watch the game, you go, he was the best player on the field that day.
And I think you take it to another level with the fact that, in terms of total passing yards and there was a whole big deal made about that and how he, quote unquote, didn't have enough of either of those. He had 24 passing touchdowns and however many passing yards. But Lamar is one of the only players in the league where he can have 155 passing yards and the Ravens can win by 20 or 30 points.
It's the efficiency.
It is. And look, we can say he had a great defense this year behind him, but the defense is not the only reason why the Ravens were as good as they were in the regular season. We can acknowledge both things. Lamar was awesome this year and was my pick for MVP, and the Ravens defense was also awesome. I don't think we have to tear down one because the other was good.
And again, this is like the eye test when we're looking at other good players. Zach, I'll let you finish with the thought. That's why with Patrick Mahomes, despite everything that happened, eye test for me, that's a guy that I know in the biggest moments, that dude's going to play. He's going to show up. It might not show all the time, but eye test. Mahomes watches it. If you watch, I saw something come up from the Super Bowls in the past. And even though they got smacked by the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, defensive players being like, what the hell is Mahomes doing? He's a magician. He's unbelievable. Like, your peers say it all for me. Your opponents say it all.
Yeah.
And so in my mind of looking at that, Lamar Jackson earned that right. And arguably, if Lamar didn't get hurt in the previous years, we might be looking at Lamar getting his 3rd MVP.
Yeah,
maybe even a 4th.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of talk of that. Even last year, he was on a trajectory to the MVP last year before he got injured.
So each year that he's finished healthy, actually, besides his rookie year, actually the 2 years he finished healthy, not his rookie year, he won the MVP.
Yeah,
you put it that way. Zach, final thoughts.
I think you guys put it perfectly. When you look at the eye test, there was one player that stood out far more than any other player, and I think 49 voters got it right.